Well, good evening, Lufkin Central and online worship community. Jason Hollinger, the campus and community minister here. And as we close off our week in our evening devotionals, tonight we're going to talk about the New Testament letters and how we are to go about reading them. Just how we're going about letting them speak to us and speak through us. And so I pray that you were blessed by this time that we have together this evening. Do not forget tomorrow morning, 10:30, together when you're ready, online when you're not. You're welcome to join us here in our worship center, and again online if you are unable. And just again, thank you for remaining connected. And if ever you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. But New Testament letters right after this time in worship.
When all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love
Near the end of the Bible are 21 letters from leaders of the early Jesus movement. They were written to small church communities in cities throughout the Roman world.
Now, writing letters took a lot of money and effort in the ancient world, and so each one was crafted carefully from beginning to end. And that means we should read them as one whole literary work.
So let's talk about how to read New Testament letters in their literary context. Of all the early Christian leaders, the Apostle Paul wrote the most letters. We have 13 in the New Testament. I often imagine him alone in his study, writing long theological essays.
But Paul didn't work or write alone. In fact, he often names people from his team who helped him produce the letters.
Oh, right, like Timothy or Silas.
Yeah, Paul was constantly with his missionary teammates, on the road working out ideas as they talked and debated and taught together. And Paul would have collected speeches, poems, and prayers in notebooks.
Like the ones he mentions in his second letter to Timothy.
Right, and so Paul would get the right teammates in a room and start pulling together old and new material. Then they would hire a professional scribe and start creating drafts until they were satisfied with how it worked together as one whole.
Then mail it off.
Yeah, the letter would be given to a trusted teammate who would also be given instructions on how to perform it before the recipients.
Perform it like read it aloud?
Yeah, most people back then didn't read. And so Paul mentions this more than once in his letters, that they were designed to be heard, which is why they often sound like written speeches.
So it's important for us to read and listen to these letters from beginning to end, too, so we can appreciate how each part contributes to the whole.
Exactly. Now, every culture has its own practice for how to organize a letter, and in the first century, there was a standard format. You have the opening, which names the author and then the receiver. Then a prayer of thanks or a greeting. Then comes the body of the letter.
This part is the main reason for writing in the first place, what the receiver's supposed to know or do something about.
Right. And then comes the conclusion, which could have greetings, travel plans, a final request, or a prayer.
So it's helpful to see how a New Testament letter breaks down into these parts.
Right. So let's take, for example, Paul's letter to the Ephesians.
Okay, there's the opening. And then a long thanksgiving prayer to God.
And in the center of this opening prayer, Paul introduces the main idea of the whole letter. It's about God's plan.
To unite together all things in heaven and earth, in Messiah Jesus. But what does that mean?
Well, as we move into the body of the letter, Paul is going to repeat and unpack this rich idea.
Right, but in the body of the letter, it's easy to get lost and lose track of what Paul's even talking about.
Totally. I mean, the letter to the Ephesians has about 3,000 words.
And that one's short compared to his other letters.
But remember, Paul wrote these letters to be heard aloud. And so he usually gives clues to the progression of thought with transition words like therefore, or because of this, or so then.
Okay, so the body of Ephesians breaks down to a lot of paragraphs, but they all begin with these transition words.
Right. And each paragraph has its own main idea. So the first one is about how the risen Jesus is king of everything and everyone. And as for you, that is non-Israelites, you are now included in the new humanity God's creating. Therefore, God's one new family consists of people from all nations.
So God has unified a new humanity in Jesus. That's the core idea here.
Right, and that theme unites all of the paragraphs in chapters 1 through 3. Then we come to chapter 4, and we get a really significant transition.
Therefore.
Yeah, that transition word is actually a hinge between the first and second half of the letter. God's unified a new humanity in Jesus.
Therefore what?
Great question. Let's keep going, and we'll summarize the paragraphs of chapter 4. God's one new humanity is really diverse. So we must live together as God's new creation. And that, therefore, requires that we learn how to love and forgive each other because we are one.
This section is all about living in unity.
Right, and so you can see now how all the parts of the letter fit together into one flow of thought. God's unified a new humanity in Jesus, therefore live in a way that fosters that unity.
Seeing it broken down like this is really helpful. It's like a roadmap, so I don't get lost.
Right, and you can read every New Testament letter this way. Break it down into smaller parts to see the message of each paragraph.
And then trace repeated ideas and transition words to see how they all connect back together.
Then you'll see how the apostles brilliantly combined all of the pieces into a literary whole that spoke to Jesus' first followers and can still speak to us today. Sing us out. My hope is built.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name. Sing that again. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness.
I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name.
Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is the Lord, Lord of darkness seems to hide His face. I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within grace. My anchor holds within Christ alone, cornerstone, weak and strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, He shall come with trumpet sound. Oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne.
All these pieces broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and whole, empty-handed, but not forsaken.